Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he said that I woke up one day and I said, I swear by Allah, today I'm going to outdo Abu Bakr in good. Like this is what was keeping him up at night. Like he always beats me. Anything I do, Abu Bakr does it better. Right? And I've got to get that layer. I've got to outdo Abu Bakr today. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I left with that mindset. My standard is Abu Bakr, right? So he said, I left with that mindset. And the Prophet ﷺ commanded us to give sadaqah. Prophet ﷺ called for charity. Umar radiallahu anhu went, he got half of his wealth, 50% of it. Brought it to the Prophet ﷺ, gave him 50%, and he said, the Prophet ﷺ said to me, what did you leave for your family? He said, I left the same amount. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ahsant, you've excelled. Great job. Right? He praised that. Umar was so happy. He's like, I got it today. Abu Bakr shows up. Abu Bakr did not say, oh yeah. Abu Bakr didn't even know what happened. He just heard that the Prophet ﷺ called for sadaqah. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu brought a batch of money. The Prophet ﷺ said, what did you leave for your family? قال أبقيت لهم الله ورسوله. He said, I left for them Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the Prophet ﷺ smiled and he praised Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Umar says, قُلْتُ لَا أُسَابِقُكَ إِلَى شَيْءٍ أَبَدًا. He said, I will never be able to beat you in any good. Like I'm done. I tap out. I can't beat this man. He always outdoes me in khair, in good. Now I'm going to narrate to you a few narrations about what Umar saw from Abu Bakr, because what I want you to realize is the trendsetter here. Most of the good qualities you see in Umar's khilafah, which was much longer, the caliphate of Umar was much longer than Abu Bakr, was something he actually learned from Abu Bakr. Okay? So this idea of charity and give it all for the sake of Allah, he got it from Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr outdid him. It kept him humble. Umar radiallahu anhu says, when Abu Bakr became Khalifa, this is extremely beautiful by the way. I want you to actually put yourself in Medina right now. Let's say Abu Bakr, you live there. Abu Bakr is the Khalifa. He leads the salah. He leads the prayer. He said every day after Fajr, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would go in an opposite direction of his house and he would go deep into the desert. I was very curious. Right? What does he do out there? So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I'd watch him every single day. Go to Salat al-Fajr and then Abu Bakr does not return home. He just walks far away into the desert. So he said, every day I'd wonder, إِلَىٰ أَيْنَ يَخْرُجْ? Where does he go? Where does he go? Where does he go? He said, one day I said to myself, لَأَتْبَعَنَّ. That's it. I'm going to go follow him and find out what he's doing. I just can't get over this curiosity of mine. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I kept the pace from him to where he was at the end of my eyesight, meaning I walked just as far away to where I could still see him. And then he said, I saw him go into this beat up old house. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I quickly went and I hid behind. And he said, he spent a long time in there. It wasn't like a short amount of time. He spent a long time until after the sun was up, meaning it was getting hot. This is after Fajr, this is way past Duha, way past sunrise. And it got hot, and then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu left the home and he made his way back to Medina. He said this is way out of the city of Medina now. This isn't even the city of Medina right now. Way out of the city of Medina. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I waited until I could no longer see him, meaning he made his way back to Medina. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, I knocked on the door. Okay? And he said, this woman opened the door. She was elderly, she was frail, she was blind, and there were a bunch of little kids running around. Okay? So I said to her, Assalamu alayki, ma sha'nukum ya amatullah. I said, peace be unto you. What is your situation, O servant of Allah? And she said that I am a blind woman, and I have no one to take care of me, and I also have these orphans with me. And the implication, Allahu Alam, her kids died, left behind, these are her grandchildren, or these were orphans. Somehow, it's her, and it's some orphan children. And she says, I have no one to take care of me, and these orphans. Umar radiallahu anhu said, who is that visitor that comes to you every single day? The answer, she says, I don't know who he is. لا يذكر لي اسمه أبدا. He never once shared his name with me. He never bothered to tell me his name. Umar radiallahu anhu said, well, what does he do? قالت جزاه الله خير. She said, may Allah reward him. Every morning he comes. Listen, by the way, she details it. She says, he cleans my home, he washes our clothes, he grinds our wheat, he bakes our bread, he cooks our breakfast, and then he leaves. Subhanallah, think about that. If this was the only narration we had about Abu Bakr, it's incredible. Seriously, the leader, the head of the ummah, the Khalifa, the most important man in the ummah right now, with his station, with his status, and he goes out every morning to this house, and he doesn't even tell the woman what his name is. He's just consider me a secret fa'il khair, right? Just some good doer. Washes the clothes, cleans the house, grinds the wheat, bakes the bread, cooks the breakfast, and then makes his way back to govern the ummah. That is absolutely incredible. Umar رضی اللہ تعالی عنہ says, every single day? Like, is this really what he does every single day? She said, every day, may Allah bless him. Umar رضی اللہ عنہ said, do you pay him anything? She said, nothing. Umar رضی اللہ تعالی عنہ started to cry, and he said, أَتَعَبْتَ الْخُلَفَاءَ بَعْدَكَ يَا أَبَا بَكْرِ. You have exhausted every successor of yours, O Abu Bakr. You've exhausted us. Anyone that comes after you is exhausted. Because this is a standard that is impossible for us to meet. A gem here, by the way, very important. Can you imagine how many deeds of Abu Bakr that history has never recorded? All the, the books of the fada'il, the virtues of Abu Bakr, the things that he used to do. Can you imagine how many of those secrets he actually managed to hide? And why did he not think of himself too good to still do that thing? Because that's a man who's Siddiq. He sets his own standards. He has his own terms. No one else sets terms for him and tells him, this is too little for you, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu has a standard of his own. And by the way, a lesson for all of us. If you're someone who does some khair that everyone knows about, you better have some khair that only Allah knows about. Right? You better have some khair that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about. And let it be an involved khair too. Okay, an involved form of good. Not just a secret charity, but this is something that has a spiritual reminder and effect on him too, right? Going and visiting this elderly woman and her orphans every single day and doing those things. One more narration from Umar, because I want to drive home this point and then we'll call it a night inshallah. Because I want you to pay attention. Everything Umar would do in his khilafah, again, some lesson of it, there was some semblance of it that he learned from Abu Bakr, who was a mentor to him, right? The standard after the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Bakr and Umar were once passing out charity. They received, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had received some form of ata, which means that some form of charity came to the ummah, was donated, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was distributing, and Umar was helping him distribute. So there was a Bedouin man that heard the news. And so you can imagine that people would rush the masjid, right? And they'd rush particularly to try to get a hold of it, make sure that they didn't lose out. So when they heard that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had something and he was going to distribute it, they charged, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu shoved the man. When he was coming to pounce on it, basically, he shoved the man just out of instinct. And Abu Bakr said, line up, everyone one by one, right? He tried to get the line straight. And while they were distributing, Umar radiallahu anhu just noticed Abu Bakr was so bothered, so disturbed, until the man came forward, and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu told him, "Idribni, hit me the way that I hit you." He could not digest that he pushed the man. And he said, "I want you to hit me the way that I pushed you." And Umar radiallahu anhu is watching this, and the man is shocked. He's like, "Iqtad minni, go ahead, take your payback, take your revenge." Umar radiallahu anhu tries to stop the situation. And listen to what he says to Abu Bakr. He says, "Ya Abu Bakr, wallahi sataj'alaha sunnah." He said, if you do this now, this is going to become the way forward. This is the sunnah. This is going to be the new standard for everybody else, right? When the leader transgresses, it's natural, right? I mean, he's trying to keep things straight, and he's, he just, in a moment of anguish, or in a moment of just the heat of the moment, he pushed the man a little bit, right? And he was justified. He's trying to get things settled. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ignored Umar, and he said, "Hit me." The man is frozen, he's not doing anything. Umar radiallahu anhu says, "Ya Abu Bakr, why don't you compensate him instead? Give him extra money instead from yourself, right? Not an extra share from al-mal. Give him some extra charity if you want. And he'd be happier with that anyway, right? He's not going to get anything out of hitting you. It's going to make things hard for everybody else. Why don't you do that? Abu Bakr رضی اللہ عنہ looks at him and he says, "Ayurdiq, would that be more pleasing to you?" The man said, "Well, actually, yeah." It would be more pleasing to him. So Abu Bakr رضی اللہ عنہ compensated him instead. But think about now Umar, the sense of justice that Umar would have, right? He was observing a leader that would teach him how to lead as well. The last statement, dear brothers and sisters, is a statement of Imam al-Muzani, rahimahullah ta'ala, which describes this entire phenomenon. He says, مَا سَبَقَهُمْ أَبُو بَكْرٍ بِكَثْرَةِ صِيَامٍ وَلَا صَلَاةٍ وَلَكِنْ بِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي صَدْرِهِ. There's some different terms, but this is the statement that's attributed to Imam al-Muzani, which means Abu Bakr did not outdo everybody else because of the amount of fasting and the amount of prayer that he did. He said, but it was something in his heart. بِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي صَدْرِهِ. There was something in the heart of Abu Bakr that just made him outdo everybody else. Okay? What was that? It was certainty in Allah's promise, and it was a desire to always do better. Right? He had this inspiration, this constant source of motivation, this constant source of inspiration that was in his heart, that if he saw a good opportunity, he'd be the first to recognize it, and then he would commit himself wholly to it. He did not wait for others to blaze the trail for him. He was always the one doing it. Right? And that's the greatest lesson you take from Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Right? Is that set your own standards. Don't let anybody else set your standards for you. You set your standards, and you be the one to set standards for everybody else too. The excellence of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did not just inspire him, it inspired everyone around him. Right? Including us to this day, where we can look at that example and we can say, sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes it's not about how many rak'ahs of Taraweeh you prayed. Sometimes it's not about how much money you were able to put up in that fundraiser. Sometimes it's about that moment of sidq with Allah, that moment of truthfulness with God, where you have a moment where you see a good and you do it. You don't wait for anybody else to claim that reward. You see something good and you rush to it. And you rush to it only seeking Allah's pleasure, not seeking anybody else's validation or approval. We ask Allah to be pleased with Him and to join us with Him and to grant us that same capacity, that same desire, that same longing for good in our lives. Allahumma ameen.